Tonight's tale begins on a stormy evening, in a quiet town not far from the rolling hills of New England. A cozy inn promises warmth and refuge, but for Detective Samuel Cross, it will become the stage for a deadly mystery. The rain came down in sheets, drumming on the roof of Samuel Cross's Plymouth sedan as he steered along the winding country road. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating trees bent low beneath the weight of the storm. The wipers squeaked back and forth, barely keeping pace. Cross muttered under his breath and tightened his grip on the wheel. He was headed to Maplewood, a sleepy town known for its antique shops and autumn festivals. His plan had been simple: spend a quiet weekend away from the bustle, catch up on some reading, maybe enjoy the peace of the countryside. But fate, as always, had a way of turning a quiet retreat into something altogether different. The Maplewood Inn came into view around a bend, its warm lights glowing through the rain. The inn was a sprawling colonial building, white clapboard with green shutters, perched on a rise overlooking the road. Smoke curled from its chimneys, promising warmth inside. Cross pulled into the gravel driveway, the tires crunching softly as he brought the car to a stop. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of pine and old books. A fire roared in the stone hearth, and the sound of storm-driven wind rattled the windows. Guests lingered in armchairs, sipping coffee or tea, speaking in hushed tones as though the storm outside might overhear. "Welcome to the Maplewood Inn," said the innkeeper, a round man with thinning hair and an eager smile. "Quite the night to be on the road. You're lucky to have made it here safely." "Name's Cross," Samuel replied, signing the guest ledger. "Detective Cross, though I'd just as soon keep that quiet for now." The innkeeper nodded knowingly, handing him a brass key. "Room 4, second floor. Supper's in the dining room if you'd like a hot meal. The storm has delayed some of our guests, but those who've arrived are settling in." Cross climbed the stairs, his suitcase in hand, and took a moment to study the hall. Old portraits lined the walls, stern-faced ancestors staring down with unblinking eyes. His room was simple but comfortable: a brass bed, a writing desk, and a window that looked out onto the rain-swept road. He unpacked lightly and then returned downstairs for supper. The dining room was warm, filled with the aroma of roast chicken and baked apples. A half-dozen guests were seated around the table. A well-dressed woman in pearls, sipping wine with an air of detachment. A young traveling salesman, his tie loosened, nervously tapping his foot. An older gentleman with a cane, whose sharp eyes missed nothing. A schoolteacher from Boston, polite but reserved. A pair of sisters, middle-aged, whispering constantly to one another. Cross greeted them politely, taking a seat at the end of the table. The storm raged outside, but inside the room was cozy, almost cheerful. Yet beneath the small talk and the polite laughter, he sensed undercurrents. Hidden tensions, nervous glances, words carefully chosen. He had learned long ago that appearances could be as misleading as shadows on a rainy night. By the time dessert was served, the hour was late. The innkeeper announced that the roads were washed out. No one would be leaving until morning. Guests exchanged uneasy looks, but most resigned themselves to the situation. Then, just as Cross rose to retire for the night, a scream cut through the hall. Sharp, piercing, terrified. Guests leapt to their feet. Chairs clattered. The innkeeper turned pale. Cross was already moving toward the sound, instincts sharpened by years of experience. At the end of the hall, a door stood open. Inside, a guest lay sprawled on the carpet, motionless, eyes staring, the color drained from their face. The storm thundered overhead. The Maplewood Inn had become a crime scene. Cross knelt beside the body, his mind already racing. Who among the guests, the polished woman, the nervous salesman, the sharp-eyed gentleman, the whispering sisters, could have turned this stormy night into murder? The scream has brought panic to the halls of Maplewood Inn. A guest lies dead, and with the storm sealing off every road, the killer is trapped inside. Detective Samuel Cross begins his first round of questions. The guests crowded into the doorway, faces pale and voices trembling as they stared at the lifeless figure on the floor. It was the young traveling salesman, his tie loose, his expression frozen in shock, his skin gray in the flickering lamplight. Cross rose slowly, motioning for the others to stay back. "No one enters the room," he said firmly. "The less disturbed, the better." He checked the man's pulse, though he already knew the truth. The salesman was gone. The innkeeper wrung his hands. Merciful heavens? Mr. Perry, that was his name. Came in from Providence just yesterday. I don't understand how this could happen. Cross's voice was calm but commanding. Bolt the front door. Lock every exit. No one leaves this inn until we know what happened. The innkeeper nodded shakily and hurried off, while Cross turned his attention to the group. They stood in silence, their expressions a mixture of fear, shock, and, in a few cases, something harder to read. The woman in pearls, Mrs. Langford, raised an eyebrow coolly. You sound rather certain this was foul play, sir. Could it not have been his heart? Cross studied her. Perhaps, but screams don't usually follow natural causes. The older gentleman with the cane tapped it thoughtfully on the floor. The detective is right. I heard the lad's cry, not of illness but of terror. Something startled him in his final moment. The sisters clutched each other, whispering nervously. The schoolteacher remained silent, her eyes fixed on the body, pale but steady. Cross gestured toward the parlor. Let's move to a common room. We'll sort this through. The guests filed into the parlor, where a fire still glowed in the hearth. Cross stood near the mantel, studying their faces in the shifting light. Let me be clear, he began. We are snowed in, the roads washed out. The telephone lines, I'm told, have been unreliable during storms. Which means, ladies and gentlemen, that whoever caused Mr. Perry's death is sitting in this very room. Gasps rippled through the group. Cross continued. So, until the authorities can arrive tomorrow, it falls to us to maintain order. I will ask questions, and I will expect honest answers. The sooner we cooperate, the sooner we resolve this. Mrs. Langford crossed her arms. And who exactly are you to take charge, sir? Samuel Cross, he said evenly. Detective. Retired, but not unskilled. A murmur spread through the guests. The sisters seemed relieved. The schoolteacher gave the faintest nod. The man with the cane narrowed his eyes, measuring him. Cross began with basics. Tell me about your acquaintance with Mr. Perry. Did any of you know him before tonight? Shakes of the head, murmured negatives. It seemed he had been a stranger to them all. Then what about today? Did he quarrel? Say anything unusual? The schoolteacher finally spoke. Her voice was low but clear. He seemed nervous at supper. Kept glancing at the window, as though he expected someone to arrive. And he left before dessert, saying he had papers to sort. Cross filed that away. Nervous, expectant, preoccupied. A man on edge. The older gentleman with the cane added, I passed his room earlier. He was on the telephone. His tone was sharp, hurried. He said something about not trusting them, though I can't say who he meant. Cross's gaze swept the room. Not trusting them, he repeated softly. His instincts told him this was no accident. The salesman had been frightened, wary. And someone had silenced him before he could explain why. At that moment, the innkeeper burst back into the room, face white as the snow piling outside. Detective Cross, the telephone line's dead. We're cut off completely. The fire popped in the hearth, throwing shadows across the guests' uneasy faces. Trapped by the storm, with a killer among them, the night at Maplewood Inn had only just begun. With the telephone line cut and the storm raging outside, Detective Cross turns to the crime scene. The dead man's room may hold the answers, or more questions. Detective Cross led the way upstairs, his lantern casting long shadows across the narrow hall. The storm rattled the windows and the old boards creaked beneath their steps. The others followed at a cautious distance, curiosity battling fear. When they reached Mr. Perry's room, Cross paused at the threshold. The body had not been moved. His briefcase sat on the writing desk, a glass of water on the nightstand, and the curtains half drawn against the storm. Cross crouched beside the body. No visible wound, no blood. His fingers traced lightly along the man's collar, damp. He sniffed the glass of water, then touched a finger to his tongue. Bitter. He rose slowly. Poison. Gasps from behind him. One of the sisters whimpered. Careful, he said. No one touch the glass. Or the desk. The older gentleman with the cane spoke with grave interest. A deliberate hand, then. Not chance. Cross nodded, scanning the room. On the desk lay scattered papers, sales invoices, train schedules, a pocket ledger with hasty scribbles. But tucked between them, half hidden beneath a blotter, was a torn envelope. Its corner bore a smudge of red wax, broken. He slipped the fragment into his pocket. Detective, the schoolteacher's voice was soft. She pointed toward the floor. A second glass, empty, lay shattered near the hearth, its shards glinting. Cross frowned. 2 glasses. 1 drunk, 1 spilled. Someone was here with him. The conclusion hung heavy in the air. Mrs. Langford pressed a hand to her pearls. Surely you don't mean to suggest one of us? Cross turned his steady gaze on her. The inn is locked, the road's impassable. Unless you believe in ghosts, yes. One of you shared a drink with Mr. Perry tonight. He examined the carpet by the hearth. Muddy footprints, faint but fresh, led toward the window. He pushed the curtain back. The casement was latched from the inside. A dead end, or perhaps a deliberate misdirection. From downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed midnight. The sound carried through the stillness, and for a moment, no one spoke. Cross closed the ledger and tapped it against his palm. We'll return to the parlor. I need to know where each of you was an hour ago. Back in the warm glow of the fire, the guests offered their alibis. The sisters had been in their room, playing cards by lamplight. The schoolteacher claimed to have been reading in the library, though no one had seen her. Mrs. Langford said she retired early with a headache. The gentleman with the cane had remained by the fire, smoking and dozing. Cross listened, saying little. Lies or truth, time would tell. The innkeeper wrung his hands. Detective, you don't think it was one of his locals? A stable hand, perhaps? Cross shook his head. Stables locked, doors barred. Whoever met Perry tonight was in this room with us. He laid the ledger on the table, opening it to a page of hasty notes. Across the margin, scrawled in shaky hand, were the words, "They're onto me." The sisters gasped. Mrs. Langford's face paled. Cross leaned closer. Beneath those words was a name, written and then violently scratched out until the page tore. Before he could examine it further, the lantern flickered. Then, darkness. The fire hissed and died, leaving the room in pitch black. A scream split the night. When the lights go out and terror takes hold, Detective Cross must rely on his wits. The killer is in the dark, and fear has a way of making people reveal themselves. The scream cut through the night like a knife. In the pitch-black parlor, panic erupted. Chairs scraped, voices overlapped, hands grasped at empty air. Stay calm, Cross barked, his voice steady above the chaos. No one moved, but someone was already moving. A shuffle, hurried footsteps across the rug. Then a crash, a table overturned. Cross fumbled for his lighter, sparking it to life. A small flame illuminated frightened faces, wide eyes, and trembling hands. The sisters clung to one another, pale as linen. Mrs. Langford had collapsed into a chair, gasping. The gentleman with the cane sat rigid, knuckles white on the handle. The schoolteacher's eyes glistened, fixed on the darkened hall. The innkeeper stumbled in from the kitchen, a candle sputtering in his grasp. The generator, it's failed. Cross took the candle, lifting it high. The flame revealed more than fear. A broken vase lay on the floor near the far wall. And there, half hidden by the shadows, was a glove. He stooped and picked it up. A lady's glove, pale satin, damp at the fingertips, as though it had been dipped in water. "Whose is this?" he asked, holding it aloft. Silence. Eyes darted. Mrs. Langford's lips parted, then pressed tight. One of the sisters whispered something inaudible. Cross tucked the glove into his coat pocket. "Very well. We'll find out." He guided the guests back toward the hearth, relighting the fire with the innkeeper's trembling help. As the flames grew, so did the uneasy quiet. "Someone screamed," Cross said. "Who was it?" The younger sister raised a shaking hand. I thought I saw someone in the hall. A shadow. Tall, moving quickly." The older sister nodded. "I saw it too. Toward the stairs." Cross considered this. If true, the figure had moved toward the guest rooms. Was the killer retrieving something? Or hiding? The storm outside rattled the shutters, a reminder that escape was impossible. They were locked together, predator and prey under one roof. He turned back to the desk, where he had laid the ledger before the blackout. It was still there, open to the torn page. He lifted it carefully. The scrawled warning, "They're onto me," remained clear. But now, in the fresh firelight, he noticed something else. Faint smears across the bottom margin, as though wet fingers had brushed the ink. Poison. Someone had touched the ledger after Perry's death. Cross snapped the book shut. "This house is full of secrets. And I mean to pull each one into the light." He fixed his gaze on Mrs. Langford. "You looked pale when I read from the ledger." "Why?" Her hand trembled against her pearls. Because I knew him. Mr. Perry. He wasn't here for business alone. He was here for me." Gasps rippled through the room. Cross waited. She lowered her eyes. We were to marry, once. Long ago. Before his dealings. He sought me out again, here at the inn. Said he had something to confess. Something that would change everything. The gentleman with the cane leaned forward. And what was that, madam? She shook her head. I never heard. I told him it was too late for us. That's the last I saw him. Cross studied her carefully. Was it grief in her voice, or guilt? Before he could press further, the innkeeper burst back into the parlor. His face was pale, lips trembling. Detective, you'd better come quick. There's been another discovery upstairs. The room fell silent. Cross rose, his shadow stretching long in the firelight. Another discovery? Could it be another body? The storm still rages, but upstairs in the old inn lies another revelation. Detective Cross climbs the steps once more, lantern in hand, to uncover what new mystery awaits. Cross followed the innkeeper up the narrow staircase, each creak sounding louder than the last. The guests trailed behind at a distance, whispering among themselves, their fear growing heavier with every step. At the end of the hall, the innkeeper stopped before a door, the small guest room reserved for travelers who stayed but the night. He swallowed hard. I heard a noise, detective. Opened the door, and found this. Cross stepped inside. The room was empty. No body on the bed, no figure crouching in the shadows. But on the quilt lay an object, small yet striking under the lantern's glow. A silver locket, its chain tangled, the clasp broken. He lifted it carefully. Inside the locket was a faded photograph of a young woman in a summer dress. The opposite side bore initials engraved in delicate script. M.L. Cross turned it over. The back was scratched, as though it had been clawed at in anger. He held it up. Do any of you recognize this? Silence. Eyes darted again, lips pressed tight. The schoolteacher shifted uncomfortably. The sisters exchanged nervous glances. Finally, Mrs. Langford spoke. Those are my initials. Margaret Langford. But I swear, I've never seen that locket before in my life. The gentleman with the cane coughed. Strange coincidence, wouldn't you say? Cross studied her. The locket was old, the photograph older still. Perhaps someone wanted us to believe it belonged to you, he said. He placed the locket in his pocket beside the satin glove. The evidence was forming a pattern, though its shape was not yet clear. Cross returned to the hall, inspecting the floor. Dust along the baseboard had been disturbed, as though someone had knelt here recently. He ran a finger through it, then turned toward the stairs. Back in the parlor, the guests gathered once more around the fire. The storm continued to pound the windows, unrelenting. Cross stood over them, lantern casting tall, wavering shadows. We have a poisoned glass, a spilled drink, a torn envelope, a woman's glove, and now this locket. None of these appeared by chance. Each points to a hand among us, a careful hand, yet careless enough to leave traces. The younger sister spoke in a trembling voice. Detective, if one of us is guilty, what's to stop them from striking again? Cross's jaw tightened. That's precisely what I intend to prevent. But it will take honesty. And so far, honesty has been scarce. He turned to the schoolteacher. You claimed to have been in the library when Mr. Perry was poisoned. What were you reading? Her eyes widened. I can't recall the title. A novel, I think. Something from the shelves. Cross's gaze was unyielding. We'll check the library later. For now, remember this. Lies have a way of circling back. And in this house, they echo louder than the storm. The innkeeper cleared his throat nervously. Detective, there's another matter. In the cellar. While checking the fuse box, I noticed, he hesitated. A suitcase. Hidden under the coal bin. All eyes turned to him. Cross motioned sharply. Show me. The innkeeper led him down creaking steps into the damp cellar. The air smelled of coal dust and damp stone. There, half buried beneath blackened lumps, sat a battered leather suitcase. Cross brushed the coal away and lifted it onto a workbench. The latch gave easily. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, were stacks of envelopes. He opened one. Bundles of cash, bound with string. His brows furrowed. Perry's business dealings had been more dangerous than he'd admitted. Cross turned to the innkeeper. Who else knows this suitcase is here? The innkeeper's face blanched. No one, except you now. But detective, one of those envelopes has your name on it. In the cellar of the storm-battered inn, Detective Cross makes a chilling discovery. A suitcase full of cash, and one envelope marked with his own name. The mystery takes a startlingly personal turn. Cross's lantern light flickered across the cellar's damp stone walls. The innkeeper's words hung heavy in the air. An envelope with his name? Slowly, Cross reached into the suitcase and pulled it free. The paper was ordinary, but on the front, scrawled in a hasty hand, Frank Cross. He slid it open with his penknife. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, folded once. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Detective, if you are reading this, it means I am already dead. Trust no one in this house. One of them knows my secret, and they will kill again. Perry. Cross read it twice, the words sinking in like stones. Perry had known he was in danger. But how had he known Cross would be here tonight? The innkeeper shifted nervously. Detective, I swear I didn't put it there. Cross tucked the note into his coat. We'll find out soon enough. Bring the suitcase upstairs. The others need to see this. Together they carried it back to the parlor, setting it on the table with a heavy thud. The guests leaned forward, eyes wide as Cross opened the lid and revealed the stacks of money. The younger sister gasped. Merciful heavens? The gentleman with the cane arched a brow. So Perry was a smuggler after all. That explains a great deal. Cross held up the note. Perry feared for his life. He named no one, but he believed his killer is here among you. And he left me this warning, to trust no one. A ripple of unease passed through the room. Mrs. Langford clutched her pearls. But why you, detective? Why would Perry write to you? Cross didn't answer directly. He recalled a brief meeting with Perry weeks ago, in a smoke-filled cafe on Main Street. Perry had hinted at trouble, asked for advice, then vanished into the night. Perhaps he had known then where his path would end. The schoolteacher spoke suddenly, her voice tight. This proves nothing. For all we know, Perry staged this entire business to draw suspicion on us. Cross's gaze sharpened. An interesting thought, miss, but unlikely. Poisoned men don't stage their own deaths. He began dividing the contents of the suitcase. Envelopes of cash, others sealed, some with wax, some with string. Each bore different initials. And one, near the bottom, carried the same torn seal as the fragment he'd found on Perry's desk upstairs. Cross held it up. This envelope once contained something Perry wanted hidden. Whatever was inside, is gone. The storm outside thundered, rattling the shutters as though the house itself groaned under the strain. The guests huddled closer to the fire, each retreating into their own thoughts, or their own lies. Cross studied them in turn. Which face hid the truth? Which pair of hands had poured poison into Perry's glass? The older sister suddenly whispered, Detective, could it be that Perry was blackmailing someone? That suitcase, it looks like hush money. Cross's eyes narrowed. The thought had occurred to him as well. If so, the question is, who among you had something to hide worth killing for? The gentleman with the cane cleared his throat. Detective, if Perry was blackmailing someone, you must ask yourself, was he blackmailing you? The room fell still. All eyes turned on Cross. For the first time that night, Detective Frank Cross felt the weight of suspicion fall squarely on his own shoulders. Accusations turned in a dangerous direction. As suspicion falls on Detective Cross himself, he must fight to keep control of the room and the investigation. The parlor had grown uncomfortably warm. The fire snapped and crackled, throwing restless shadows against the walls. Yet the guests seemed colder now, their gazes sharp, distrustful. The gentleman with the cane leaned back, his voice deliberate. It's not impossible, you know. A detective caught in his own snare. Perhaps Perry paid you off once, Cross. Perhaps he threatened to tell. The sisters murmured uneasily. Mrs. Langford shook her head, but her eyes avoided Cross's. Even the schoolteacher, who had been quiet, now looked at him with something between doubt and fear. Cross straightened, shoulders squared. His voice was firm, but not raised. A murderer always welcomes confusion. But I'll not let one of you plant your guilt on me. Perry came to me for help. That's the only connection we shared. He drew the letter from his pocket again, reading Perry's final words aloud. Trust no one in this house. The words seemed to hang heavier this time. Cross slipped the note away. We waste time pointing fingers at the wrong man. The truth lies in Perry's dealings. These envelopes, these initials, each one must mean something. He spread them across the table. One bore the letters JW, another SLA, third was marked only with a number, 47. The younger sister leaned closer. Do you suppose these are names? Clients? Or victims? Cross said. Blackmail leaves scars. The innkeeper spoke hesitantly. Detective, years ago, there was a scandal in town. A missing deed. Land on the riverfront that vanished into Perry's hands. He made enemies then. Plenty of them. Mrs. Langford's face turned pale. You can't mean? Cross looked at her sharply. What do you know of this? She pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Only gossip. That someone close to Perry was involved. Someone wealthy, respectable. He used that deed to ruin them. The gentleman with the cane tapped his handle thoughtfully. Perhaps our Mr. Perry didn't come here merely to rest. Perhaps he came to collect, one last time. Cross let the theory hang as he studied their faces. The sisters huddled together, frightened. The schoolteacher twisted her hands in her lap. Mrs. Langford looked near faint. The man with the cane, though calm, watched Cross with unnerving intensity. At that moment, a gust of wind howled down the chimney, scattering ash across the hearth. The fire guttered. Cross rose quickly, relighting it with a poker. The storm raged as though it wished to drown out the very truth. From the corner, the schoolteacher spoke at last. Detective, if Perry was blackmailing someone here, then it explains why the telephone wires were cut. Whoever killed him wanted no chance of outside help. They meant to keep us trapped. Cross nodded slowly. Yes, which means the killer is not desperate to flee. They are confident. They believe they can outlast us. His gaze traveled the room. But confidence breeds mistakes. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from upstairs. All heads snapped toward the ceiling. The innkeeper stammered, that came from the locked study. Cross grabbed his lantern, moving swiftly to the stairs. Stay here, he ordered. No one follows. But behind him, feet scuffled. Someone disobeyed. At the study door, he pressed his ear against the wood. Silence now. He pushed the key into the lock, turned it, and entered. The room was as before, papers scattered, the desk bare. Yet something was different. The shattered glass near the hearth had been cleared away. And on the blotter lay a new object that had not been there before. A revolver. Polished, ready, and still warm to the touch. A gun left on the desk, still warm to the touch. Has the killer armed themselves, or planted a trap for Detective Cross? Cross lifted the revolver carefully, holding it to the lantern light. The steel gleamed, the handle worn smooth from use. His trained fingers checked the chamber. One bullet missing. So, someone had fired this weapon recently. He scanned the room. The curtains swayed slightly, though the window latch remained shut. No footprints, no sign of struggle. Only the revolver, waiting on the blotter like a message. He slipped it into his coat pocket. Whoever left it here wanted it found. The question was, why? Footsteps creaked behind him. Cross turned sharply, hand on the butt of the revolver. The schoolteacher stood in the doorway, pale, trembling. I told you to stay downstairs, Cross said evenly. I couldn't. I heard the bang too. I thought someone had fired a shot. Perhaps they did, Cross murmured. But if so, where's the bullet? She clasped her hands tightly. Detective, I swear I've told you the truth. I was in the library earlier. I didn't harm Mr. Perry. I couldn't. Cross studied her face. Fear, yes. But fear of guilt, or fear of discovery? He motioned her back. Return to the others. And say nothing about this gun. She hesitated, then obeyed, vanishing into the hall. Cross lingered a moment longer, scanning the study. On the desk corner, half buried beneath invoices, was another clue. A torn railway ticket. Destination: Boston. Date: tomorrow morning. So Perry had planned to leave. The killer had stopped him first. Cross slipped the ticket into his notebook, then extinguished the lantern. He returned to the parlor, revolver heavy in his coat pocket. The guests looked up as he entered. The gentleman with the cane smirked faintly. Well, detective? Another ghost upstairs? Cross ignored him. He placed the railway ticket on the table. Perry meant to leave tomorrow. Someone here wanted him gone tonight. The sisters leaned forward. But who? That, Cross said, is the question. And this inn is closing in on the answer. He looked around the circle, voice steady. I found a revolver upstairs. One shot fired. I want to know whose it is. A beat of silence. Then the gentleman with the cane chuckled dryly. Mine, of course. Licensed, kept for protection. Though I assure you, I did not fire it. Then why was it left in Perry's study? Cross pressed. The man shrugged coolly. Perhaps someone took it from my room. Framed me. Or perhaps our Mr. Perry took it himself. We'll never know, will we? Cross's jaw tightened. We will know. He turned to the innkeeper. Check the windows upstairs again. Look for a bullet hole or a lodged round in the wall. The innkeeper nodded, anxious. Yes, detective, right away. Cross faced the guests again. Listen well. Perry was poisoned, but now a gunshot has entered the picture. That means 2 attempts on his life, one by subtlety, one by force. Either the killer grew impatient, or there are 2 guilty hands among us. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, silence pressed down heavy. Mrs. Langford whispered, if there are 2, then none of us is safe. Cross's gaze swept over them, sharp and unyielding. Safe or not, the truth is close. And I will drag it out, even if it means tearing open every secret you've buried. Just then, the innkeeper stumbled back into the room, face pale as chalk. Detective, I found the bullet. It's lodged in the upstairs wall. Cross frowned. And? The innkeeper swallowed. The angle of the shot, it wasn't aimed at Perry at all. It was aimed at you. The room went deathly still. Someone in that house hadn't just wanted Perry dead, they wanted Detective Frank Cross silenced too. The bullet wasn't meant for Perry. It was meant for Detective Cross himself. The hunter has become the hunted. The parlor fell into silence so deep that even the storm outside seemed to pause. Cross's eyes narrowed as the innkeeper's words sank in. The bullet hadn't been fired in panic, nor in haste. It had been aimed with purpose. And the target was him. Cross laid the revolver on the table, its steel dull in the flickering firelight. Someone here has decided I've pried too close. That gunshot wasn't to kill Perry. It was to kill me. The sisters gasped, clutching one another. The schoolteacher pressed a hand to her mouth. The gentleman with the cane leaned back in his chair, lips curling faintly as though amused. Then you should be more careful, detective, he drawled. The walls have ears, and some ears don't like your questions. Cross ignored him. His gaze swept the group, sharp and cold. Let me be clear. Attempt to harm me again, and I'll consider you guilty before the gallows. The innkeeper wrung his hands. But, detective, if the shot was for you, that means the killer knew you would be in that room. Exactly, Cross said, which means the shooter is no stranger to my movements. They've watched me closely. He leaned over the table, eyes narrowing. And that narrows the suspects. A log shifted in the fire, sending sparks leaping. The room shivered with unease. Cross straightened. Enough. I'll not waste more breath tonight. One of you has drawn blood already. Tomorrow, at first light, I'll search every inch of this inn. Until then, no one leaves this parlor unaccompanied. You will sit here, under watch, until dawn. The schoolteacher trembled. But detective, what if the killer strikes again before morning? Cross's hand hovered near the revolver. Then they'll find me ready. He moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The storm lashed the glass, rain streaking down in torrents. Beyond the trees, the night pressed black and endless. No escape, no help. Behind him, voices whispered nervously. The sisters murmured prayers. The innkeeper stoked the fire with shaking hands. Only the gentleman with the cane sat calm, his eyes glinting in the shadows. Cross studied him. Too calm, too entertained. You find this amusing? Cross asked quietly. The man lifted his chin. I find it inevitable. Perry played his hand poorly, and now the rest of us are caught in the game. As for you, detective? He tapped his cane against the floor, once, twice. You've placed yourself squarely in the line of fire. Do you truly think you'll walk out of Maplewood alive? Cross didn't answer. He turned back to the fire, mind racing. The poisoned whiskey. The railway ticket. The revolver with a missing bullet. And now, the attempt on his own life. Too many threads tangled together. Yet somewhere in the weave lay the killer's hand. The clock on the mantel ticked past midnight. The storm raged on. Shadows stretched long across the parlor floor. Cross remained awake, revolver within reach, eyes scanning the faces before him. At last, the schoolteacher dozed fitfully, her head drooping. The sisters huddled under blankets. Even the innkeeper's chin sagged to his chest. Only 2 remained watchful, Cross and the gentleman with the cane. Their eyes met across the dying firelight, locked in a silent contest. And then, faint but unmistakable, came a sound from upstairs. A floorboard, creaking under a hidden step. Cross rose, revolver drawn. Someone's moving, he said. And it isn't a ghost. The parlor erupted into panic. Cross dashed for the stairs, every nerve alight. Someone upstairs had made their move, and the next body to fall could be his. Footsteps on the staircase, a revolver in hand, and the final act about to unfold. Cross moved swiftly, his shoes whispering against the old rug as he took the staircase 2 steps at a time. Behind him, the parlor erupted in cries, the sisters clutching each other, the innkeeper calling his name in terror. The creak of a floorboard above pulled him upward, revolver raised, heart steady despite the storm of nerves. The house seemed alive in the storm, rafters groaning, shutters rattling, but he knew the difference between wind and footsteps. At the top of the stairs, a hallway stretched dark, lined with guestroom doors. One stood slightly ajar. A thin beam of candlelight spilled through the crack. Cross approached with care, revolver steady. "Show yourself," he called, voice cutting through the rain outside. "Or I'll drag you out myself." No answer. He pushed the door wide. Inside was Perry's room, the dead man's belongings still scattered where they'd been left. The bed untouched since the body was removed, the smell of whiskey faint in the air. And there, at the writing desk, a figure stood with their back to him, candlelight haloing their shape. "Turn around," Cross ordered. Slowly, the figure obeyed. And in that moment, the truth fell into place. The schoolteacher. Her eyes were wild, her hair loose from its tidy bun. In her hand, not a book of lessons but a small vial of liquid, the same poison Cross had smelled before. "You," he said softly. "All along." She gave a brittle laugh. "Yes, detective. Me. Poor, harmless Miss Aldridge. Invisible to everyone. A mouse in the classroom, a shadow in the parlor. No one ever suspects the quiet ones." Cross didn't lower the revolver. "You poisoned Perry's drink. You left the ticket. You fired the shot meant for me." Her hands shook, but her voice rose sharp with conviction. "Perry deserved it. That man ruined my brother. Swindled him blind, drove him to ruin, and laughed about it. And the law did nothing. So I took justice into my own hands." The storm thundered outside, rattling the window panes. Cross's voice remained calm, steady as the weight of the revolver in his hand. "So you slipped into his room, poured poison in his whiskey, and watched him die." She nodded, tears streaking down her cheeks. "And when you came, you wouldn't stop digging. I had to silence you, too." For a long moment, only the storm answered. Then Cross lowered the revolver, just a fraction. "Miss Aldridge, listen to me. Perry's sins don't excuse your own. You've taken a life. Nearly 2. There's no path forward now but surrender." Her grip on the vial tightened. No path, but one. She raised it toward her lips. Cross lunged. In a flash, his hand struck hers, the vial shattering against the floor. The acrid stench of poison filled the room. She gasped, staggering back as the glass tinkled to stillness. The revolver remained steady, aim true. "It's over," Cross said firmly. "Justice will be served, but not by your hand." Downstairs, hurried footsteps sounded. The innkeeper and others crowded at the door, gasping at the scene. Miss Aldridge sank to her knees, sobbing into her hands. The fight drained out of her like rain through the roof. Cross holstered his revolver. He felt no triumph, only the heavy ache of a truth uncovered too late to save Perry's life. But justice, at least, would not slip away into the storm. By dawn, the sheriff arrived, summoned by telegraph through the inn's crackling line. Miss Aldridge was led away, her head bowed, the storm easing into pale morning light. The guests whispered in relief as the first sunlight cut across the parlor floor. The nightmare was over. Cross stood at the window, watching the gray clouds part. The inn creaked in the quiet, weary but standing, just like its guests. The innkeeper approached softly. "Detective, thank you. Without you, we'd have all been lost." Cross gave a thin smile, lighting a cigarette. "Maplewood Inn will rest easier now. But the truth, it always finds its way, storm or no storm." He exhaled smoke, eyes narrowing against the morning sun. Another case closed. Another shadow lifted. And with that, Detective Cross turned from the window, coat in hand, ready for the road ahead. For in the end, murder leaves many questions, but only one answer. And Detective Cross had found it.